My wife got addicted to substances and left me for another man. I'm now in love with her sister and I want to date her. I'm finally at a point where I can't stand this anymore. I've been in love with this woman for a very long time, maybe a couple of years at this point, and I'm not sure if I should just ignore the feelings or attempt to make something with her. My ex-wife and I met at 23 and our relationship developed very quickly. By 26, we were married and even had 2 amazing kids together. However, within months of being married to my ex-wife, she had an affair. Worst of all, the man she cheated with got her addicted to hardcore substances. When I found out, I immediately confronted her because I was concerned for her well-being. I didn't even care too much about the affair because I didn't want anything bad happening to her. She said she was going to get help, but she left in the middle of the night instead. Years went by and I didn't hear anything from her. Others have told me that she's still with the guy she cheated and they're both homeless now. At the time, our kids were young and I had to raise them on my own, so I didn't have the time to chase her down, nor did I want to after what she pulled. Not only did she abandon me, but she abandoned our kids, and for that I couldn't forgive her. I ended up getting a divorce in absentia. I did, however, maintain a very positive relationship with my in-laws after the fact. Every other weekend my kids stay over with their grandparents on that side and they pretty much treat me like a son. I still go to parties at Christmas and am reasonably liked by the family. Nobody talks about my ex anymore, mainly to not worry my kids. My son is very hurt by his mother leaving. He's only 9 and I had to get therapy for him after he told me he hoped his mother was dead. She had been getting verbally abusive toward the end, which was when he was around 5 or 6. A year after my ex left, her sister and her boyfriend had started coming around a lot to see the kids. They would babysit a lot and called it practice for when they had children of their own. My kids loved them and were spoiled by them, which I didn't mind because we all needed a little positivity. They eventually got married and were very much in love. However, her husband was unalived in a workplace accident shortly after the birth of their daughter. It has been extremely rough and painful for everyone involved. I wanted to repay her for helping me out in my tough situation, so I followed her example and began to take her daughter to give her time to herself if things got too hard to deal with or she needed alone time. She's been in grief counseling for a few years, but she still wears her ring and has told me she can't ever imagine dating again. I talk to her about him frequently because I could tell she needed someone to talk to. She's gotten to a better place, but she's still in love with him. I can't imagine that sort of pain. Over the last 2 years we've been a more constant figure in each other's lives. My kids love their aunt and I have her over for dinner a couple times a week. I've moved on from my ex by this, but the idea of dating someone possibly dangerous as their mother has kept me out of the dating scene. I don't know when it happened, but slowly I began to get soft on my sister-in-law. She's a great mom for what she's had happen to her. She's one of the sweetest people I know and her sense of humor always leaves me laughing and happy. Then I started realizing that I'm physically attracted to her. I've always felt kind of guilty about it because her late husband was a good friend, and since she's obviously still grieving, so I've kept it to myself. We've been together a bit more lately and I see her more than I see most people. Nothing romantic has ever been discussed and I try not to flirt, but last week it was very late and after the kids went to bed I made us a few drinks, not enough to get intoxicated, but she decided she'd rather spend the night, so I took my couch. I woke up to breakfast this morning and the 4 of us felt like the sort of family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, which is not something she normally does. I still didn't say anything, but after she left I found my son quietly playing with his toys in his room. He looked upset, so I asked him if he was alright. He tells me point blank in the way only a kid can that he wishes sister-in-law was his mother. I sat down with him and asked him why he thought that way, and he gave a whole bunch of reasons for her being nice to him, that she never yells about anything. He likes seeing her with his grandparents and she draws pictures with him, which I didn't know they did. By the end of it my heart is already melting for this woman, even more wound up. When visiting, dropping them off with their grandparents, I tried to breach the subject with her folks to kind of feel around how people would see. I made a joke about her and I acting like a married couple sometimes, and they didn't laugh and were kind of standoffish, friendly, but either they know something or they disapprove. It's getting too hard for me to ignore or pretend it's not getting to me. I'm in love with her. Either I've got to do it and find some way not to think of her, or I have to find some sort of way to navigate through this situation and tell her everything. Our children were gone to their grandparents' house Sunday night and I realized that we would both have a free night. Normally I'd just game or hit the gym an extra night, but I figured it would be the perfect opportunity to confess to her without the kids being around. So I sent her a text saying, "Hey, kids are out this Sunday, I was thinking you might want to get dinner." It was a fairly upscale place that reopened 2 months or so ago for outdoor dining. I never ask her out to dinner and we're almost never alone together, or without a child in the other room, so I was insanely nervous. She says she'd love to, and so my panic starts setting in because now I have to actually act on my feelings. I ask her if she'd prefer meeting at my place and taking one car or meeting at the restaurant. She says she'll come by my place first. I'm a bit more cleaned up than normal, dressed up but not overly dressed. She shows up and my god, she's in a very nice evening dress, makeup, not something she normally wears, really looking stunning. I must have been slack-jawed for a second, I had to be because she just looked so gorgeous. I swear I fell in love with her all over again in that moment. We made a little small talk complimenting how we looked, but I still don't have my nerve yet and she isn't pushing the issue. Dinner was really wonderful and I had a great time with her. She tells me this is the first time she's really had an adult social outing that didn't involve her daughter in a few years, and I mentioned that it's the same for me. We're laughing, joking, talking, a little casual touching here and there. I can't seem to find my nerve though because I was afraid of ruining this moment, so I just submitted to having fun. But as we're leaving my mind snaps and I'm just like F it. When we stand to go back to the car, I give her my arm and we walk back to the car. There. Was no awkwardness between us and we didn't even mention what's happening, which I honestly think was for the best at the time. I opened her door for her and I planned on driving her back to her car. As I open the door she stops me. She looks sort of nervous, she just outright told me to stop and that she wanted to kiss me. There was no alcohol at dinner so this is all her. I pull her in and we kiss. I can barely describe how wonderful it felt to finally touch her. Well, the kissing went on outside this restaurant with her leaning against my car for at least a half an hour. When we finally break, we share a few more dreamy looks before we get in the car and drive back to my place. She's holding my hand as I'm driving. I don't think I've ever been happier. I confess to her that I've started having feelings for her a long time ago, but with the terrible things we went through I didn't want to scare her away. She tells me that she's felt the same for 6 months. At that time I had gone on a couple Tinder dates and since we were just friends I described what a mess of a time those dates were. She tells me she began feeling intensely jealous and angry that I was seeing these girls. It was about that time it clicked in her mind that she had somehow developed feelings for me. As it turns out I didn't approach her because of her late husband and she wasn't approaching me because she was afraid I'd see too much of her sister, my ex-wife, in her and start to resent her for it. I invited her in after we got back home and we decided to try and fight off the desire to jump straight into bed. We just sat on the couch snuggling and talking about what we would need to do to make this a working relationship. There were some really teary moments there. We of course talked about her late husband a little and where she feels in the grief process, saying I don't want to rush her and that I'm not going anywhere if she needs time because I'll wait as long as she needs me to. She says that she feels like she's in a place where she could love again, that she's long past feeling guilty for having feelings for me, and it was something she struggled with. She then brought up her sister and asked me a couple of questions. What would we do if my ex ever decided to show her face around here again or try to get back into my kid's life? What if she comes back reformed and apologetic, would I take her back? I told sister-in-law that's a hard no, that I've forgiven her for cheating on me, but I will never forgive her for what she did to my son. He was quite a sunshiny and happy boy before his mother started cheating, using, and lashing out at him. He's doing better now, but for a long while his behavior and negativity for somebody so young troubled me. Sister-in-law was concerned how he might react to her as unlike our respective daughters he is old enough to understand everything. I told her not to tell him as it might embarrass him, but not too long ago he told me he wished his aunt was his mom instead. We said we were going to take it slow and now go too fast with things, but the kissing started again. Since we were in private this time we gave up the fight to stay out of the bedroom. I have had fantasies throughout the duration of my feelings for her, and getting to pet her face in the morning was one I finally got to live out. Moving forward, we are going to establish date nights and work on building on our already strong foundation. When we inevitably tell our folks we're a couple we're going to do it together.